Hi, Lori.
Good morning.
So Joe said that Julian's setting up the cart now, so hopefully the
Awesome.
cart will be joining us shortly.
Okay, awesome.
So I
All
just
right,
gotta
so
log into PI.
I'm just logging into Zoom or having PI log into Zoom. There we go. I felt so awful yesterday that such bad timing.
It happens though.
Like I just woke up like I had Jessica's chorus concert Tuesday night. I mean, I felt a little tiny like maybe something's coming on, but it wasn't awful. And then I just kind of went to bed when I was home, but it was kind of a long day anyway. And then oh my gosh, like Wednesday morning I woke up and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm chills and oops, I can't hear you.
No, I wasn't.
Oh, there we are.
Oh, here we go. Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yep. Yep.
Okay. So the public input page looks like it's working. I'm signed in as GTC 2,
Okay,
so
excellent.
not to mess you up. Alex and I talked about that yesterday.
Okay.
I keep saying my internet connection's unstable. It was saying that the other day when I did the UDC meeting too. So, but it never bombed out on me.
Right, right.
Okay. So it looks like public input's all set.
Oh yeah, got the wrong one here. All right, so on Zoom, does it look okay? Yes, there's our public. I'm gonna rename that.
I think I sent this link to the cart yesterday. I tried to anyways.
Yeah, I saw that you did that.
Okay.
It should have been there, but it's always good
Oh,
to do that.
Teams. Yep, here we go. Are you seeing the things to admit people or is it just me?
I am, but I'm not sure why. I don't have it. It's not supposed to be set to have to admit people. Yay.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Can you hear us? We cannot hear you. Nothing? I see Joe. Maybe he's messaging me. So
Oh,
this
wait.
happened.
Did I just rename the wrong?
Yeah, you did.
I did. Sorry about that.
Okay, Lori. So they cannot hear us. They're gonna try to get the speakers working. So Jim
Okay.
said to keep chit chatting until it works.
Now there's something nobody ever tells me to keep talking. See,
I
they
know
didn't
for
even get to
the
hear it.
planning committee, we had to put it on speaker, right?
Yeah,
Like
and
this.
that's a good alternative because everybody can hear. It's fine. So
It's weird that it stops working though. Right? It was working just fine for like a year.
no, I hear somebody. I thought I heard somebody.
Can you hear them, Lori, in the room?
No, I thought I heard something, but
Are you
no.
guys talking? You're not on mute, so I can hear you on my phone.
Yeah, Jody, one thing about being remote is that we can't indulge in some of those treats that I see being set.
Well, is Alex, well, does Alex need to be, can you do it through Alex's computer? Then, but then everyone can't hear because it's just going to be his computer. Like if Alex signs on to Zoom and doesn't leave his computer muted, his computer should pick up. I don't think it's going to pick up enough of the. Yes.
Here we go.
Can you hear them now? You can hear him, Lori?
No,
It's probably just my phone.
I thought I heard something click, but must have been you.
Okay. We had to do that for the planning committee, so that makes sense. Okay. Okay, sounds good. Bye. So they're gonna do what we had to do for the planning committee, which is where they called in to Zoom with the speaker
Oh, okay, that's fine.
conference line. So that should work. It's strange that it's not all of a sudden not working though.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
We can hear you loud and clear. It sounds good. I don't know about the back of the room yet, but
Y'all wanna?
I'm on now, Jody. Can you hear me okay?
yeah, you're
Yep.
echoing a little bit, but not bad. You just have to speak up.
Yeah, let's try
probably.
this. Hold on.
I'm just gonna grab an external plug. Hear me now?
A little bit better.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, yep, I can
Yeah,
hear.
we can hear you.
Okay, I just wanna make sure the mic's working. I'm gonna bring that, all right.
Yeah,
You might
Jim,
just have to move the camera too to kind of see the whole room.
I got you.
Jim, can you do a test just so we can hear you? This was a little fuzzy.
All right, can you hear me okay?
That's better.
A mic right here.
Yeah, that's better. Just try to remember to speak loudly, a little bit loud and clear. There we go.
That's good.
All right. I can move this table in the middle, put the phone in the middle so you can hear it.
We can grab another one.
I don't know if people gotta be, I don't know how big the meeting's gonna be.
So then is the room on the speakerphone or on the cart?
Say it again?
Is the room on the speakerphone dialed in or on the cart?
It's dialed in. The microphone wasn't working, the speaker wasn't working, but I could hear me.
Oh, okay.
So I had to put it, I moved this and everything.
Oh, okay. That's fine. It's working. So,
All right, let me get to the back of the room just to make sure you need it. Talk about the date. I think. Can you hear me okay back here?
yep.
Yes. Yep, you sound good.
Morning for you. February. Yeah. March first. Okay. All right, yeah, the dates are there, from the day off. Yep. Everyone knows that. No, that's all good. Eclipse deal.
Everything looks and sounds good. Should I go ahead and mute their room here until they're ready to start?
Yeah, if you can hear us, if you can hear them perfectly, then, yeah, you can mute us. Yeah, Lord, if you can hear me from over here, yeah, I mute it.
Yep, I hear you, Alex.
Actually, if you hit this button real quick. Now you can hear us
It
now?
sounds like they muted themselves. Yep. Yep.
Yep, we can hear you.
So is it? All right, so we'll mute our mics when you're ready, when it's unmuted. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
All right.
Great, thank you.
You are
Okay, this is working just before Julian left the room.
It always works that way.
Yeah, we've muted it for the call, and now it's not unmuting.
That's good. We can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you guys.
Okay, so from the big speaker then?
Yes. Yep. Sounds good.
Everybody sounds, yeah, everyone sounds good.
Call the meeting to order. Alex, if you would please call roll. Just some information, contact information for folks, doing via publicinput.com. We have the public forum portion as well. Just an overview of today's agenda. Now on to the call to, Genesee County, Ms. Dye.
Present.
County Chairperson. Monroe County Legislature, Ms. Lamar. Ontario County Aaron.
Jack Marin.
Orleans, Peter's here as well. Orleans County, Ms. Johnson. Seneca County, Mr. Hayson. Wayne County, Mr. Egner.
Here.
Wyoming County, Ms. Ryan. Yates County.
Tim Cutler representing.
Monroe County Executive, Mr. Bell. Doug Price here representing. Monroe County Planning Board, Mr. Santos.
Representing.
Monroe County Supervisors Association. Monroe County at large, Mr. Hogan.
Here.
County at large, Mr. McCann.
Scott Levis is representing.
The Rochester Mayor Evans. Rich Perrin representing. Rochester City Council, Mr. Melendez. Rochester at large, Mr. Frisch.
Dominic Feckety representing.
Rochester Genesee Regional Transportation. Carpenter representing. Our State Development Corporation, Ms. Knight.
Steve Golding representing.
New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, Mr. Pagos.
New York State Department of Transportation, Ms. Dominguez.
Will Kleinberg representing.
New York State Thruway Authority, Mr. Driscoll.
Sean Carrington representing.
Aviation Administration, Ms. Martinez. Highway Administration, Mr. Marquis.
Gaudamati representing.
Federal Transit Administration, Mr. Goodman.
Trying to read the chat, looks like Jerry did.
Thanks. Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Alex. Open up the public forum at this time. I'll ask if there's any members of the public wishing. Also ask if any, written comments.
No, Chairman, there are no public comments at this point. But I would remind the people presenting to speak loudly and clearly, just for best audio for all of us.
Thank you for the reminder, Laura. Thank you. We'll move forward with approval of the August 25th meeting minutes at this time. I'll ask for a motion and a second to consider those.
Will Kleinberg, so moved.
Rich Barron, second.
Thank you. Now I'll ask, are there any corrections that anyone would like to share with us, before we approve the minutes? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the minutes are carried. Also inform the board that the draft minutes of the November 10th, 2022 Planning Committee meeting minutes are, have been provided for informational purposes. Next, we'll move on to communications and announcements. If you would, please.
One announcement around, the need for GTC offices to move. Monroe County is rehabilitating the 8th floor of our building, and the county is to consolidate, staff into owned space versus learned space. At this time, at Genesee Finger Lake offices on the 8th floor, so they're we've known about it for a little while, and then in September we about a schedule. So we're expecting to move next month, but our final location is still not yet determined. But recognize and thank Jeff McCann. Earlier this week, he was pushing, trying to help us get finalized. We have offered up that developers we work with some county, we're willing to wait, but we don't have to be, or I'm sorry, co-locate. But we don't have to be co-located. The other thing to note, I guess one of the benefits of COVID, everything we have from staff operations is in the cloud now. So our staff impact will be minimal if we have any delay in getting into the space. From a work perspective, it's just a matter of accessing the paper documents that's really needed in a while. The other thing we're doing is, because we know we'll have less space, we're working on culling duplicate copies of things, downsizing, particularly our library. There is documents going back decades. In conjunction with tomorrow, the planning coordination committee that meets every couple months is getting together, and it's GFL called Pizza and Pillage. So after the normal meetings, they're going to share some lunch and get to GFL's library, our library, for things like comp plans that they might not have elsewhere, and we'd rather see put into somebody's library that can use them instead of being disposed. And that would be different than like GTC studies, but we get copies of project design reports, project studies, comp plans, a whole host of things. So I'd rather see them put to use for, the other thing is anybody's looking for 3-ring binders and magazine holders that are still in very serviceable condition. You end up with file cabinets and tables. Any questions about our move?
I would ask on the library, I mean, one of the benefits of that was everything was in one location. For historical records for the most part. Some
Well,
plans go back to the sixties or seventies and.
yeah, the thought was
Knowing
that
where
if we had like a town comp plan or village comp plan, that county plan office. We're not looking to busting, but, you know, stuff that's kind of dated, anything that's a GTC sponsored plan or study, we will retain.
Of course.
But things like the 1973, outdoor recreation, perhaps there's a better repository for it.
Oh, maybe, but I'm just saying they're not in a single location anymore, at least. those
Right,
who knew
yeah,
They could come to GTC.
And
They
these
have
are
that.
typically things that haven't even been,
It's been
I don't
asked
think they
for.
even realize they exist, so.
Okay.
But the thought was that, so for example, we have a table set up, village and town comp plans sorted by, county. So when the county planners come in tomorrow, they can take the ones for their community. And GFL has done the same thing with their county. Formal documents so that, again, that, east, so that historic, we expect considerably less. But, you know, journals and periodicals, have been, something that GTC funded or, if we had, for example, some reports that, on a state project that a few weeks and to DOT. And once we get a sense of what's there, we'll probably turn that back over because after the fire many years ago, some documents were lost, so kind of giving it back to the copy and they don't.
No issues with NICE, State Education Department Records Retention Schedule?
No, we're working with that retention schedule to make sure that, for example, our meeting packages and minutes and founding documents, those are all permanent records. So, we're also looking at, high capacity scanning service that, you know, right now it's on paper, if something happens, that's the only copy we have, so it makes sense to do scanning anyways. But for the old meeting packages, if we scan those, now we've got a record, and everything since, April of 2020 is electronic anyways. The old resolutions, I'm not gonna recycle paper copies, but having a scanned copy of something, that paper copy got damaged, right now, as it stands, we don't. That's another thing that we're looking at, scanning services, and shredding services too. Document.
Yeah.
I came across something with, people's social security numbers because we're free about sharing information, and this was like, in your but I'm still not going to. Any other questions or comments about our move? All right.
Move on to reports and action, business, and yes, Scott.
Thank you. Good morning and happy holidays, everyone. Planning Committee met on November 10th and recommended the GTC board accept 4 reports as evidence of include the Monroe County recommending complete streets in the
Sorry, can you go a little louder, we'll make sure the microphone.
Okay.
Thanks.
Start over?
No, I think keep going.
Okay. Let's planning complete streets in the Genesee Guidebook and the Victor Connectivity and Access Plan. We also recommend amending the federal fiscal years 2023 by RTA and the New York State. Additionally, the planning committee took the following actions. The scopes of work for one UPWP task, last mile or less site plan review. And we approved 18 administrative modifications for as requested by the town of Batavia, Wyoming County. A list of those projects, please feel free. That's my report.
Jim, staff report, GTC.
So, following up on our last meeting, I wanted to report that, staff is making progress on the resilience. And, last meeting, or maybe last meeting, Federal Highway Administration formula funds for the new, program, but the formula funds are only going to states. There is mention in the act about tax funds being available to FBOs, but it turns out that they're gonna make the discretionary funds available to FBOs to release guidance for funding on the discretionary side of things. I don't know how that meshes up with congressional intent, but that's how Federal Highway rolled it out. Formula versus discretionary. But back in late September, Federal Highway Administration had conducted a peer review, process on resiliency, and they invited Joe Bavenzi of our staff to go talk about what we were doing in our region. And he was able to, talk about our efforts with some Federal Highway representatives, and the feedback we got is that our, vulnerability assessments that we've already done create a good foundation to, for our plans. So we'll be able to, I think, build on that foundation and without too much difficulty, get into a compliant plan.
Just a second.
I'm sorry, was somebody online trying to say something?
Note that said audio and.
Sorry, an audio?
The audio, this is Lori. The audio does seem a little bit choppy from now and again. I'm not sure what could be done to resolve that.
Yeah, Alex just swapped the microphone pucks. One of the challenges was that the rechargeable pucks were not plugged in. And Julianne realized it just before the meeting, so we're getting. I'll try to make sure I'm talking into the center console.
Okay, it does seem better now. Yes.
All right, thank you. So one of the other big efforts we have going on is working on planning for the 2024 eclipse, total solar eclipse that's coming through our region. I have at the end of the agenda to do a presentation on that and talk about some recent efforts of our staff. And the other big thing that we are working towards, within our existing work program, we have a budget for doing a household, well, I'm sorry, we didn't call it household travel survey, travel data collection program. Traditionally, this involved doing a household travel survey where you identify a representative sample, you mail out surveys and ask people to maintain a travel journal over, typically 7 days. And we did this, I think it was about 12 years ago, 10 or 12 years ago, and the purpose of it is to understand travel patterns and behaviors for our regional travel demand model. But it's very costly to do it the traditional way. Last time we spent close to $500,000 to do the survey. Since then, many of these, so-called big data sources have come around. How many of us are carrying one of these in their pocket, and this tells us where people are, or tells the data collectors, the data providers, where we're going. So of the big providers out there, we were fortunate to learn in September that our counterparts in New York City funded a big data package called Replica HQ for the transit agency in New York City, the Metropolitan Transportation Authority. But they threw a little bit of they threw a requirement in that said, we want you to make this available to all the MPOs across the state. This was not something we knew was coming or expected, so it was a great benefit to us. We will have, for the first year, free access to this data. We've had some introductory sessions. As I understand it, RGRTA, at least for the RTS mineral properties, have been talking to Replica HQ as far as what might benefit within a origin destination. So we'll be able to work with Julie Boasi and her team about trying to do some of that data once we know more about it. I think, Alex, you've done some initial strips of sending some stuff their way. Our on-call travel demand model consultant also has access to a big data source. A company called RSG is our consultant, and they've offered to allow us to gain access to that. We're trying to understand what cost implications that will be, but we know it would be considerably cheaper. Earlier this week, our staff was talking to a company called AirSage, and we're working on meeting with another company called Streetlights. This is following up to Alex and I having some conversations at the National Association of MPOs conference. But that all said and done, we're thinking that if we go to these multiple data providers and they're all telling us, pointing in the same direction, that gives us a greater level of confidence that that's the direction we should expect. If they're pointing in different directions, now we have to do some sensitivity analysis and try to understand the differences. But as it stands now, like I said, there's $475,000 budgeted in the current UPWP. Taking this approach with the free access to Replica, our travel demand model consultant, we could probably access all of these data sets and get a deeper sense of people's movement for less than half the cost. So that's what we're pursuing. It's not spending it because it's there. And what we'll be able to do, any savings we'll be able to turn back into the program and have it available for other planning studies in future rounds. So that's a big shift from how we've done it in the past, and it's something we kind of thought as a possibility, but now there's active conversations that now we're looking at 2023. The census data is out. We'll be able to do a update and what they call a validation of our travel demand model, and then that will show that it's acceptable and meets standards for using it for our transportation planning purposes.
Question,
Yeah.
Jim? How much are you gonna give a COVID factor on that, even in 2023?
We're looking at some reports. Some of these companies have done some analyses, some sort of before and after COVID. What we're trying to do is, at least for our baseline, get some pre-COVID to set the baseline.
Okay.
And use the archived historical data that says, all right, but then trying to understand the new patterns and how many people are doing work from home, and even if they're doing some travel, they're probably not doing it 5 days a week, depends on the nature of the job. Sometimes, people are splitting home and work, and there are a lot of academics and other people doing analyses across the country to see what are the trends that are sticking and what is reversing. So we're going to try our best to, it's probably going to be like, scenario A, scenario B, scenario C, but we're trying to understand what were the patterns before, what are the patterns after, what's sticking, and it's absolutely something that every transportation agency is wrestling with. How do you anticipate what's coming back in the shift in patterns? So,
right. Thank you for that.
I don't have an answer as to how we're going to do it, but it is something we're aware of.
Part of it. I mean, it's
Yeah.
going to be a big part of it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Any other questions in the room? Oh, anybody online, questions or concerns about the staff report? All right.
Sounds good. Jim, some federal legislative funding updates?
Okay, so fun in Washington. Since the last meeting, Congress did not come to terms on a new federal budget. On September 30th, the president signed a continuing resolution that continued the federal programs at their existing funding levels and existing rules, through December 16th. My impression was that, they can get agreement to get past the election, and, I guess they left a little bit of time for the runoffs. But as of yesterday, no agreement yet on a top line number, between the Republicans and the Democrats. I saw a figure, something about maybe $26 billion separation, so it's not a big gap. But there's also disagreement on treatment of some of the recent veterans programs that were created. Do they get treated as domestic spending for budget purposes or a separate program? So then do they count towards the GOA score? So we'll see how it goes. There is potential that, I should say the appropriations committees are still moving forward, working on omnibus that would cover all 12 of the spending bills. That is happening simultaneously with discussions about moving forward. We know come January 2nd, the House, control of the House will switch. As of Tuesday night, the Senate is going to be a 51-49 in favor of the Democrats. So that gets away from the 50-50 we've been dealing with. So there is potential to extend the current continuing resolution to December 23rd to have some more time to try to balance those budgets. If they can't come to terms, there's also conversations of doing a continuing resolution through September 30th to lock in the budget priorities before the new House majority takes over. Still a lot of unknown. It doesn't sound like the threat of a shutdown next Friday, which has happened in the past, but still a wait and see. One of the challenges with the continuing resolution is any of the increases that we were expected as part of the transportation infrastructure bill do not get realized. The funding stays flat, the rules stay the same, but at least the fiscal 2022 budget that just expired rolled up the new legislation, so we're not working under the bipartisan infrastructure law rules. At least the rules are being updated. So with that, I'll try to answer any questions.
Sounds good, Jim. Thank you.
I still have some more. That was just.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jim. I thought you were finished.
No, sorry. I should have been clear on the continuing resolution.
Very good.
Carbon reduction program is a new program under the IIJA, and we've yet to receive final guidance out of Washington. And you may recall that the federal government did not have full budgets until March, so all the new rulemaking for all the new programs needed rulemaking processes and guidance to be developed. So I think they're close, but it's not issued. We do know that the state has to do a statewide strategy due to submit to the feds by November of next year. But in the meantime, there are designated amounts for urbanized area, the way the program's set up, by population. Right in the legislation or in the appropriations rather is funding, for example, for the Rochester large urbanized area. At the end of August, NYSDOT main office did provide us 5-year target for the urbanized areas. So for Rochester, it's about $1.25 million per year. Beyond that, there is 35% of the pot can be used anywhere in the state. So there's about $17.5 million a year will be available for statewide solicitation. I don't have a timeline on when that program might be, but Joel Kleinberg and I have been working and having conversations about bringing some project ideas to the TIP Development Committee in January. Some of the leading candidates are trying to identify some transit uses, but also, interestingly enough, the program fact sheet specifically mentions Traffic Operations Center. So the idea of maybe using some of the funds on the Traffic Operations Center to free up funds for other types of programs. But the dollar amount, the $1.25 million a year, it's just not
not significant enough to warrant, like, you're reaching out and trying to solicit projects and have people submit applications. So the thought being, working through the TIP committee and the planning committee, we'll be able to make a recommendation to the board, for your consideration, hopefully in February.
Jim, I know there's not guidance available yet, but is there any thought as to, for a period of years to create a larger project? Or, yeah.
That is the interpretation that NISDOT main office has. Many of the programs, it says, all right, if the funds are made available in this federal fiscal year, they have to be obligated in that fiscal year. This program, specifically the feds have said no, that they can be accumulated. I guess I should have been clear. The guidance would be like, for example, congestion mitigation air quality funds have to have emissions calculations or be known as a known emissions reduction. Safety funds have to have a safety analysis. In that case, we don't have anything that says, okay, this is how you're going to justify that a project qualifies for carbon reduction, other than the emphasis is on reducing CO2. They've told us that in the fact sheet. They told us some general, all transit projects are eligible. Like I said, the Traffic Operations Center. There was a few categories borrowing from other programs, like the Surface Transportation Program, that they'll say, okay, these project types identified on some others will be eligible. So it's more like the final rulemaking and official guidance that hasn't been out, but we do have summary guidance based on what has been interpreted out of the legislative text. All right. Joel says nothing to add for his perspective. And that concludes my legislative funding update. Happy to answer any other questions folks might have. Thank you, Jim. I'd like to inform the board that the TIP staff modifications report is included in the meeting packet, and if anyone has any questions, staff can answer them. That's a list that Scott was referring to earlier. Was it, or was that the admin mod? Oh, sorry. So the staff modifications, again, are even more minor than administrative modifications, and part of the deal is when we make those with concurrence of the TIP Development Committee, we report them out at the next available meeting. Thank you. We do have some action items to consider this morning, and I would ask on the UPWP project closeouts, we could consider them as one action, or if any member or alternate would like, we could have a separate vote on one or combine any sequence of resolutions for consideration. So I'll ask at this time, is everyone comfortable with considering all these under one action? Well, good. Hearing none, I'll ask for a motion in a second, and then we'll ask Jim to provide an overview on these.
Genesee.
Thank you. If you would please, Jim, overview and for consideration. All right. So the first project on the screen is going to be the Monroe County Land Use Monitoring Report. This project was conducted by Monroe County, and the purpose was to document land use and development trends in Monroe County for use in updating the GTC travel demand model, and I'm sure it goes into some other planning efforts as well. Tasks included distributing municipal surveys and following up for those with those who don't respond in a timely manner. But the report compiled annual and proposed development by municipality, as well as at the traffic analysis zone. And you will notice, 2021, basically each calendar year is the cohort of data. So, yes, we're late in 2022, but this is the 2021 report. The report does include some trend analyses and graphics to better understand the data. And as shown on the pie chart on the screen, the greatest number of projects fall into commercial and residential categories, the orange on the bottom and the blue to the upper right. And within that residential category, major projects might include, single-family or multifamily projects, that can result in very different densities. So depending upon the density, that's gonna affect our transportation demand. So, a 100-unit subdivision on half-acre lots versus 100 units in an apartment building will have very different, traffic impacts. The report also looks at the number of residential units, to better understand where development is occurring. And this was suggested a few years ago, as a lot of development was occurring in City Rochester and downtown. It wasn't enough to know that there was a building going up, but understanding how much density is gonna be in that building. So the units, is a change we put in a few years ago, and I think it's a change for the better. In calendar year 2021, there were 98 major projects in Monroe County. And looking at a trend over the past 5 years, Henrietta and Greece, have issued the most permits, and I think anybody familiar with the county would not be surprised on that. The planning staff did look at the impacts of COVID on the development, proposals, and there was a noticeable divergence between, there was an increase in commercial permits and a decline in residential permits. So, we'll see how that trend continues, but, for whatever reason, the commercial development was still going strong and the, residential not so much. I don't know if anybody has any questions about this one. I can move on to the next one. Okay, so, similarly, the Genesee Finger Lakes Regional Planning Council does a regional land use monitoring project that is, basically all the counties outside of Monroe County, so the remaining 8. But they do this in collaboration and coordination with Monroe County. So, I don't know, I could quite call it an integrated process, but they're definitely, inform each other. And I believe some of the data collection that Monroe County does is, provided to GFL for their analyses, so. Like the other project, the purpose of this project was to document land use development trends throughout the region, for use by GTC and any other member agencies, for, our primary use is updating the travel demand model. The report does compile residential, industrial, commercial, community service, and mixed-use permits, so it differentiates a little bit different, than Monroe County. And, GFL RPC staff did distribute the survey to all the municipalities in the region, but unfortunately only got a 76% response rate. Due to that, the staff looked to supplement with a survey from the Census Bureau and the New York State Uniform Code Annual Report. These are other data sources that look at development. And despite these efforts, there were still 12 municipalities in our region that did not respond to any of the 3 surveys. So, certainly couldn't ask GFL staff to do any more than they did to try to get this information. And, 12 out of 188, we can manage that. Within calendar year 2021, the development trends seem to stay consistent with previous years. And outside of Monroe County, Farmington continued to issue the highest number of residential permits with the highest number of units. I think what we're seeing as development in Victor kind of fills out and easy access on 332 to the thruway, Farmington is at the frontier of development, and I don't know, supervisor must be doing something right, or yeah.
The numbers will be high for 2022 also.
Of course, that creates its own challenges with transportation, but at least 332 is a corridor that can support quite a bit. So we'll see how the build-out goes there. Are there any questions on the regional land use report? All right. Implementing complete streets in the Genesee Finger Lakes region, a guidebook. This is another project conducted by Genesee Finger Lakes Regional Planning Council. The purpose was to enable municipalities to develop and implement complete streets policy, and really, the guidebook would serve as a how-to for communities to prepare and implement municipal street complete street policies. It includes a summary of complete street design elements and information on implementation benefits and challenges, so the community can be more informed if they choose to pursue it. The guidebook includes model local ordinances, and they really set it up to be a little bit different, whether you're a large community with staff support or a small community with volunteer boards. The idea of creating something that's easy to work from, to develop that policy and to continue to monitor implementation. This was a project where we did a case study. The Village of Perry served as that case study, and both GFL, RPC staffs, and GTC staff provided some technical assistance to the village, and the village developed and implemented a complete streets policy. So we have some practical Western New York experience built into the guidebook. So we hope it's a resource that as communities decide they want to take that path, they're not figuring it out completely on their own. Yes, Rich?
Just a quick question on that. I know several years ago it was looked at, there was an inventory of which municipalities had their complete streets policies or something like that. It's on the spot, so I don't expect necessarily you'll have an answer, but I'd just be interested, has that increased? I would think this guidebook will definitely help for any of those communities that may be on sort of the boundary of going, well, hey, now I've got something with some, as you noted, very practical ones, but have you seen like an increase in the number?
I don't have an answer for that. Is there any chance that Emily Royce is online? Is here? She's not, okay. We can follow up. I suspect since the last time we did it, probably a decade ago, there's more communities that have done it, but I think more recently, a lot more communities have become interested in it.
Okay.
And they're seeing, especially after COVID, more people walking or riding their bike or different things that, the residents have a different expectation, I think. And so, moving forward, I think more communities, particularly the smaller walkable communities, will be looking at this kind of stuff, so that the guidebook is timely in that manner. But I don't have an answer as to how many more have implemented, say, in the last 10 years, but we could try to follow up.
Thank you.
And it's possible the report makes reference to when some of these have come in play. I've not read the entire report, sorry.
It does, yeah.
I'm sorry, what's that, Jeff?
It does. We have in the report a list of all the complete streets policies in the region, including the cities and all that, so that information is there, so.
Does it include when they were adopted?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so there's a turn in there, great.
Take a look when the report's posted on the website. No, thank you, that's perfect.
Thank you, Joe. The next project is the Victor Connectivity and Access Plan. This project was conducted by both the town and the Village of Victor jointly, and the purpose was to develop a long-term street network master plan to identify the gaps in the network connectivity and provide concept-level plans to connect the streets and control access. This was about being able to circulate around the community, especially with the traffic backups on Route 96. There was a long-term street, or the project developed a long-term street, sidewalk, and trail network master plan. Again, identifying the gaps in network and providing some concept-level plans for improvements. The expectation is that the recommendations will enhance access and mobility for all users, going to prioritize links between key community assets and destinations. There was an inventory of current conditions, a needs assessment, looking at traffic issues, including the delay on Route 96 through the village during the peak hours, and documenting the gaps in the sidewalk and trail networks, as well as development of recommendations to satisfy those. The recommendations are aligned with some previous planning studies. There was the Route 96 Transformative Corridor study that GTC funded, the Village Access Management Plan that GTC staff participated on, that town's Parks and Recreation Master Plan were all considered and informed this effort. There are several recommendations, such as extending Adams Street. This was also in the Route 96 Transformative Corridor. It would create a new complete streets, multimodal corridor, between the village and New York State Route 251 and would utilize the existing, rail corridor that's, it's Finger Lakes Railroad. Basically, they're down to one trip a week or less, less frequent. One trip about every 6 weeks. Okay, one trip every 6 weeks. So, basically, the rail operators, you know, it's really not in their interest to keep the rail line active. But the right-of-way provides an opportunity to create, a little bit of, I don't want to call it a bypass. It's more like a local road alternative to Route 96, and some of the businesses along Route 96 that can gain rear access. People could park behind the building and go in. The village street, providing a more walkable environment, places for biking, parking, and not be caught up in the traffic on 96. So again, and it doesn't bypass the village, it actually serves the village, so bypass would not be the right word. Another recommendation to extend Anthony Drive to Brace Road, that would directly connect Brace Road with Route 96. Establishing 12 sidewalk and trail connections among various locations through the project area. Implementing improvements to the Route 96 and High Street intersection. Right now, it's a challenging intersection. There's the potential for a roundabout there, but at least signal timing improvements. There are recommendations for local street connections and potentially the changes to the school district busing operations. Again, challenging location at the buses are limited there now anyways. And then the document does also, you know, recognizes the past planning efforts and reiterates a lot of the recommendations out of the previous studies. The town and village are working with state DOT as far as any improvements on Route 96, and state DOT was a stakeholder in the project. So there's nothing being put out there that is a red flag for DOT. Obviously, design and implementation comes with its own challenges, but nothing that is a showstopper for sure. Any questions on this project?
Thank you, Jim. Is there any, before we consider these, I'll ask once more, is there any, these closeouts, any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of these 4 closeouts, vote aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None, that's carried. I'll ask the same question on these 2023 to 2027 tip amendments. Is anyone, opposed to considering these under a single action? Hearing none, I'd ask for a motion in a second to allow Jim to discuss these. We have a motion in a second, if you would please, Jim.
Sure.
On these amendments.
So the first project in the list is the Route 18 over Northrop and Smith Creek Bridge replacements. This is simply a schedule change. It allows us to rebalance the fiscal constraint across each year. As we make different project changes, we came out of balance for one of the years, and NISDOT looked at their program and realized that this one, we could defer the construction one season, and the bridges will hold up, and the fiscal constraint comes into balance. The next project's a little bit bigger change, the 590 bridges over Route 31 and Allen's Creek. Again, another amendment requested by NISDOT. The change reflects the latest estimate, and the project scope has been clarified more. But the estimate for the highway crossover, as it stands now, traffic would have to cross over to allow the bridge to be closed and replaced. That crossover estimate came higher than originally anticipated. The comment was significantly higher. But then the scope of the project is also being expanded. NISDOT looked at the pavement in that area, and it needs attention, and the thought being The pavement between the two bridges can be addressed while the bridges are shut down, as opposed to coming back in a few years and disrupting traffic again. The non-standard features within the shoulders will be addressed. The shoulders need to be widened and the pavement thickness needs to be thicker in the shoulders. So all those items can be addressed while the road is already closed for the bridges. And again, won't have to come back in the future with a paving project on the interstate that's gonna shut down lanes. So that made a lot of sense. The next few, there's 3 projects, the Route 31 over 490, I-490 over a railroad bridge, and I-490 from Route 204 to Howard Road, all have the same situation. Again, amendment requested by NISDOT. NISDOT Region 4 is pursuing contracted engineering services that would supplement their in-house services. In the past, in-house engineers have done all the design. A lot of the communities, counties, and cities and villages would be familiar with the idea of bringing a consultant engineer in to do the work. NISDOT has started doing that, but it's a learning process for them, and based on recent projects, they've realized that they need more lead time to get that consultant on board, get the project, get up and running. So the request here is to accelerate engineering phases so that the construction can stay on schedule. NISDOT main office recognizes that this is a different way of doing business and presents some challenges. So what they've offered up is to utilize state dedicated funds to fund the engineering, but with some payback later on, that where we originally had intended to use federal funds, we would draw down. In essence, main office, Albany will advance us the funds and get paid back in the year we were expecting to use them by reducing our federal allocation. But at the end of the day, no net impact. It's a dollar for dollar swap. The next project, the 490 bridge over Garnsey Road. This amendment, again, is requested by NISDOT, and they want to adjust the project schedule and funding based on an updated pavement treatment type. As the engineering was progressing, the preferred treatment was determined to be what's called a diamond grind with spot repairs, as opposed to redoing all the concrete with a heavy concrete restoration. This treatment is considerably less expensive and will provide many years of useful life, but at the same time, there's a limited window of opportunity to achieve that. And because of the lesser intense treatment, the design effort is less, so the detailed design phase will be. The schedule adjustment, the construction could be covered by state dedicated funds. Again, main office advancing with some payback in the year that was intended. However, because this treatment is considerably less, the net effect will be returning federal funds to the regional balance. We will be actually saving federal funds, even paying them back in, I think it's 2025. Say again? 2026. Before I move on to the transit projects, is there any questions about the highway and bridge projects?
A quick question, because of all the increases in engineering, et cetera, is that built into this, or is that?
So, when we first programmed the TIP, we did use a consistent inflation factor to what's called the year of expenditure dollars. So we were working in 2022 to program things in 2026. Ultimately, that might come up a little low. We used a consistent statewide factor. I think it was 2 or 2.5%. But as we're doing the engineering, we're making adjustments. NISDOT and other project sponsors are constantly trying to keep up with when they open bids and get actual costs. They can adjust their tables that say, oh, for this treatment or this product or this, here's the unit cost changes. So that guidance is being updated, but I suspect as we move through design processes, we're going to be doing a lot of catch-up and trying to find ways to increase project costs. Now, there's only 2 ways we can cover that. We can defer projects in order to shift funds from one project to a project that ends up being more expensive, or the local project sponsor brings more to the project budget and we don't change the federal amount. But yes, to your question about, trying to factor in higher costs, that's really gonna come down to during the design phases. Every quarter, we entertain an amendment request, and, you know, a lot of times you'll see, you know, a cost increase due to the latest project, you know, latest engineer's estimate, so.
They weren't temporary, they seem holding.
That, and that's the thing that, you know, in a couple of years when we do the next tip, maybe that inflation factor needs to be adjusted, but again, there is a commitment to moving projects forward, and, at the end of the day, it's either, bringing more local resources to bear, deferring projects that can be deferred, in order to free up federal funds, or, you know, potentially bringing discretionary funds in to offset existing funds, but typically the discretionary funds are used for new projects or additional projects. But, at the end of the day, you know, the projects need to be addressed, and there is a commitment to getting them done eventually. And Joel, I don't know if you have anything to add from a state perspective, a fiscal manager for the Fed.
Yeah, even yesterday, we were discussing inflation and certainly struggled with it. For the 4 projects that were presented, at the very least, they're based on 2022 estimates as opposed to 2020 estimates, so we're 2 years closer. Our engineers do their best. Crystal ball certainly isn't there, but earlier you talked about the carbon reduction program. Under normal circumstances, I'd certainly be recommending we projects. In circumstances, that may be a relief valve if we already on the program, and core funds to help sponsors address overages that may be less desirable, that may just be where we have to go.
I got an email this morning from Orleans County. John Pepinetti had a conflict. He wasn't able to join the meeting, but yeah, we just opened bids on a project I think was $40,000. I was like, all right, we're gonna be coming looking for something, but you know, $40,000. You know, if we don't have it, we don't have it, and the local project sponsor has to come up with it. But you know, our next tip meeting is January 20th, and you know, it's just it's the ongoing management of the tip that these are the realities we have to work with. You can plan and put in the best information, but you can't know any certainty until you're much closer to the project delivery dates. So,
and one other trend we're seeing is that for communities that are using consultant services, the consultants being aware of the industry, where their estimates are actually coming in high. Low bids, the one Jim just mentioned came in slightly high. We had 2 others the same day that the engineer's estimate was higher than the low bids. Everyone's chasing and using their calls to the best of their ability. In all cases, it was higher than the program's amount. So we're doing our best. Promising, yeah. I mean, it hasn't been the case lately for me, but yeah.
any other questions or comments on the TIP project? Or at least the highway bridge. So I'll move into the transit side. The next project, reinstating the shared mobility project, is requested by RGRTA, and the funding would move from federal fiscal year 22 to 23, which is the current the year that's currently anticipated to be obligated. Really, what happened was there was limitations when the funds were transferred from Federal Highway Administration to Federal Transit Administration. I should say these are congestion mitigation air quality funds. FTA had to take a look at their rules and apply the FTA rules, and it was determined that contracted bike share services were not eligible. And this is how bike share has been done in our community. There was, the city had done that, and FHWA said, you know what, we already approved it, we're not gonna pull that back. But since FTA had not approved it yet, they said we can't. And this was under the FAST Act rules. Under the new transportation bill, this would be allowed. But since the money was issued under the old bill, we had to stick with those rules. If RGRTA wanted to buy the bikes and buy the station to run the program, the capital expense would have been eligible, but contracting for the service for another company to own and operate things was not permitted. So there's a reduction there to reduce the funding for the ineligible activities, but this project also had a band pool portion that would stay continue to run in coordination with the city. The next project related to that, since the funds could not be used to operate the bike share, RGRTA asked that the funds be shifted to the community mobility zone operations. This is
Some of the fixed route transit was pulled back, in the, outer edges of the RTS Monroe system. It's an on-demand, van service, and,
exceeded all expectations as far as popularity, so it's going well. NISDOT main office and Federal Transit Administration both agreed that it was appropriate use of the funds, so they're comfortable shifting the CMAQ funds to this project. The next project is to increase the cost of the RTS Access Paratransit Facility, an amendment requested by RGRTA. The design funds need to be moved from federal fiscal year 22 to 23 to align with the anticipated date that FTA will approve those. Unfortunately, the environmental review process delayed FTA approval, so they could not, in essence, obligate the funds. The FTA uses a term putting them in the grant in 2022 as anticipated, but the funds are still available for the project to continue. And then RGRTA was also successful in getting a discretionary fund grant for the construction of the new facility. So you'll see, another phase of 25 million. We went from having design in there to adding funding for the construction as well. And again, a successful discretionary grant award. The next project is to increase the total cost of the hydrogen fuel cell vehicle and fuel system project. Again, RGRTA was successful in getting discretionary funds, so they're going to be able to increase the number of 40-foot hydrogen fuel cell buses and move forward with their fueling system. They're going to try large buses and vans to see how well they work within the system for zero emission fuel vehicles. One of the lessons learned with the electric buses is, in the wintertime and in the summertime, there is more battery used for changing the temperature of the air, heating in the winter and cooling in the summer, than actually propulsion of the bus. So that certainly affects the range of the battery. So, perhaps hydrogen will perform differently, and part of the project is a partnership with Plug Power, who has put in a facility in Henrietta for constructing fuel cells, and they're building a clean hydrogen production facility out in Genesee County, and they're a New York-based company, so it's a nice partnership there to see, okay, get some hydrogen produced in our region, try it out and see, it's going to be leading the industry, right, Bill? That, there is a test bed, essentially, between a bus manufacturer, a hydrogen producer, and a transit operator, and a lot of analysis that will go on to see how does hydrogen fit in cold weather climate cities where certainly heating is a drain on the battery. There is also a minor adjustment in the state share of this. There was, we've received clarification that state funds cannot be used to match the discretionary grant. So as opposed to a traditional 80%, 10%, 10% on the 10% state, 10% local on transit projects, it's going to have to be 80% federal, 20% local. Bill, I don't know if there's anything you want to add on the transit projects?
Only that, in a few weeks, we'll have the largest electric bus fleet in New York State. PA is at 15, we're 12, another 8 being delivered in January and February. And, we saw some information that the MTA would have the first hydrogen bus. We had a check, and we'll have
Scoop 'em. That's it on the tip amendments. Any other questions, comments?
Thanks, Jim. Hearing no further discussion, all those in favor of, taking action on these tip amendments, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed?
Who was that was opposed?
No.
Oh. Oh, it was a delayed aye, okay.
Delayed aye, so, very good there, carried. We'll move on to the new business. Before Jim gives his presentation, I will make mention, everybody please mark the calendars for our 2023 meeting schedule, and the next meeting will be here at this location in, the same format, hybrid format, February 23rd, so.
Right.
With that, Jim, presentation on, the 2024 event.
All right, so bear with me while Alex switches presentation to the Eclipse. I've mentioned this in the past, but a lot more, as we're getting closer, more activities occurred. So if you haven't heard yet, April 8th, 2024, there will be a total solar eclipse coming through Rochester. Very significant event. I know our staff has been looking at it, talking about it since 2018 when Jody Benix came back from the Transportation Research Board and said, hey, in 2017 there was this eclipse and they had a lot of traffic issues and it's coming to Rochester in 2024. So we've been working on it for quite a while. Next slide, please, Alex. So we're not doing this alone. There is a Rochester Eclipse Task Force that is really being headed up by Visit Rochester, looking at various sectors related on the tourism side of things. Rochester Museum and Science Center, or at their now officially known as RMSC, looking focused on the science and education aspects of things, coordinating a lot of efforts, and then GTC looking at traffic, emergency preparedness, transit, public safety, sort of the government side of things. We're essentially a co-chair of this task force. There are close to 400 people locally coordinating, and that's only expected to grow. This is, it's one more thing in people's activities. There's no one agency responsible for anything. And as Dan Schneiderman from RSC likes to say, everybody under the sun is a stakeholder. So this affects everybody. Next slide, please, Alex. So just to give a sense, the task force, their role is to raise awareness as broadly as possible. The solar eclipse is a great opportunity, and there's challenges. And, it's really not any single organization can take on all the effort. You can think of this as a planned event in a lot of different places. So all the different agencies around the table, and some even that are not in this room, certainly have a role. And the people who do this on a daily basis, the transportation agencies, the traffic folks, the maintenance folks, the event planners, the emergency manager folks, they're all in the best position to manage their aspect. But only by working together can we ensure the best possible experience for our residents and our visitors. So moving into GTC's role, what are we doing? We're trying to coordinate with the larger community. We're trying to get the word out that this is happening and what can we do to work together. We want to be part of the success stories and not the traffic-related horror stories that happened after 2017. And we do have the benefit of lessons learned from not that long ago. But at the same time, we recognize that GTC does not own, operate, or maintain any transportation systems, any infrastructure. Our member agencies do. So we want to inform, convene, connect people. We want to share resources and assist our member agencies and stakeholders any way we can. Our publicinput.com platform includes an Eclipse-related page, GTC Eclipse. That's going to be our clearinghouse for some different resources and presentations, events, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. Can we move on, Alex? So what kind of efforts have we done at the staff level? We have been participating on the Regional Eclipse Task Force, as I mentioned, but due to some of the efforts that Rochester had already been doing, we were invited to participate on the American Astronomical Society's local planning work group. So we are the only NPO on that group and trying to reiterate with folks around the country, talk to your transportation folks, talk to your NPO. Interestingly enough, when I was at the National Association of NPOs conference in October, I had a chance to talk to my counterpart from Cleveland, who's hosting next year's conference, and we'll also have the eclipse coming through. They were not aware of the eclipse, but the state of Ohio emergency management folks are doing an awful lot of stuff. But the MPO for Cleveland, their director didn't know about it, so hopefully somebody lower in their staff knew about it, but it was interesting that, so we've tried to encourage, talk to your transportation folks. Our involvement in the American Astronomical Society and RMSC's efforts to date, I think were recognized when Rochester was selected to host the National Solar Eclipse Planning workshop held in on October 3rd. GTC, not October 3rd, a little later in October, but GTC was involved in 3 presentations, 1 plenary session, 2 breakout sessions, so I got to talk about various aspects. We have set up regular meetings with New York State DOT Region 4. Joe Leathersich is their public information officer and fortunately interacts with all the different offices within DOT, so we're making sure at that point of contact can connect with the right people. We've done several presentations to emergency management officials across the region, and we're working on hybrid workshops for the transportation sector. We held our first one on November 29th in Rochester. Between in-person and online, we had about 55 attendees. Last week, we were in Batavia, again, about 32 attendees, and next week we'll be in Hopewell, Canandaigua, right over the line. The thought being, we're trying to cover 9 counties, and we can go out as a staff and be closer to where the people are and sort of break up the region a little bit. The other thing we're doing is working with the New York State Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Services to plan and conduct a multi-agency tabletop exercise, likely in the fall of 2023. They're working towards that. And that would bring the folks together from city, town, county, state, all the emergency management officials, the public safety officials, transportation officials, and just try to walk through what could we potentially see. We're also trying to raise awareness on timing of starting new construction projects. The DOT is already looking at that. The lead time on designing and scheduling projects, typically we would say, hey, come April 1st or thereabouts, you can start a new construction project, maybe do lane closures. Well, this happened April 8th. So for 2024, we're asking to hold off the start. But that is something that's worked into contracts and scheduling and planning. So now is when they have to start thinking about that. Similarly, looking at avoiding oversized loads. These are permitted loads that, whether they're long or overweight, you think about the wind turbine blades, hey, in North Carolina, they're replacing some transformers right now. That would still go through. That would be an emergency, but, the planned oversized loads. There's a company in Batavia, Graham Corporation, that makes very large machinery that goes out into the oil industry. Probably don't want to have one of their trucks rolling out that weekend. So the idea of even reaching out and raising awareness to our counties with any companies locally that are their logistics and lead time of whether producing something large or taking delivery of something large, you want to factor that in. If something's taking you 18 months to build, 12 months to build, you don't want to have planned for that weekend to be delivered. So again, our coordination, we're trying to spread the word. Next slide, please. A little bit of the science, really basic. What's going to happen with the solar eclipse? So the moon is going to cross between the Earth and the sun and make a big shadow. The more concentrated shadow, the umbra, will be complete darkness, and the penumbra will be some variation of partial eclipse. So this, I believe, the zip code is at RMSC. So the eclipse will start progressing at 2:07 and start crossing and blocking out the sun. At 3:20, there's going to be complete blocking of the sun for about 3.5 minutes in Rochester, a little bit more. You'll see on a map in a moment the center line. The closer you are to the center line, the longer the duration. And then the moon passes past or starts to uncover the sun again, and 4:30. So although the main event, that 3.5 minutes of just complete darkness is going to be there, the whole process is about 2.5 hours. So there's an event going on. Move on, Alex. So just a little bit of a timeline. A total solar eclipse, while not a rare event on Earth, but the Earth is 75% or covered about 75% water. Having an eclipse where you live is very rare. The last time it happened in Rochester was in 1925. The last time it happened in the United States was 2017. Here we are today in the middle there. April 8th, it's going to come through Rochester again. The next time we'll get a total solar eclipse in the United States will be in 2045. You want to travel to that? You're welcome to it. The next time it'll happen in Rochester, 2144. So 125 years from now, you know, chances are we won't be around to see it. You know, maybe our grandkids. So in that respect, you could call it a once in a lifetime opportunity in having it in your backyard. Next slide, please, Alex. So, you know, what is this going to mean? Well, this is an event that's happening everywhere at once. It's going to be the single biggest mass travel event, certainly in 2024 in the United States, maybe in the history. The path itself is only about 120 miles wide. People will travel to that path to experience. I came away from that AAS workshop, you know, with kind of thinking about the analogy. You're not sort of pregnant. You either are or you aren't. You're either in totality or you're not. And people say, oh, 90% of totality. And the folks that have experience and the scientists, like, that's a misnomer. 90%, you know, partial eclipse, sure, but totality is totality and outside of totality is not. But as, you know, as I said, Rochester's in the path. You can see it's going to start in Mexico, head northeast, come up through central United States into Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York, and then up into the Canadian Maritimes. Within this path, there's already 32 million people who live here. And some large metro areas, St. Louis, Cincinnati, Detroit, Toronto, Quebec. These were all pretty close, so they're going to be a draw. They're not in the path, but people will travel from those areas. The last eclipse in 2017 went from Oregon down to South Carolina. Didn't pass through as much developed area, as many cities. This path is much more compact. There's a lot of excitement on 2017. A lot of people felt like they missed it, so the expectation is more people will travel for this one. So looking a little closer into Rochester, I was talking about the center line. Between those blue lines will be total darkness. The red line is the very center. The closer you are to the center, the more duration of darkness. But you see I-90 there, the New York State Thruway, I-90 through. For 4 hours, 4 consecutive hours, some portion of I-90 is going to be dark. It's going to be quite an impressive phenomenon. So certainly people will draw to there. Moving on, Alex. So for our area, Visit Rochester is estimating 350 to 500,000 visitors, in addition to the 1.1 million people who already live here. That's coming just to our region. When New York State looked at our region plus Western New York, next slide, please. They're estimating 1 million visitors to the region. So this is going to be a major event, major opportunity for your your communities, your restaurants, your businesses, your lodging, and it's a great time to showcase Western New York. Moving on. So I talked about drawing from the east. Rochester is the easternmost city in the path that has a science center with a planetarium. We expect that to be a draw. And when you look at how close we are to different things, within 400 miles, Boston, Springfield, Massachusetts, Hartford, Connecticut. Moving on. Also, when you look at, next slide, please. Philadelphia, Baltimore, Washington, D.C., Manhattan, you know, the whole New York City area, those are all within 400 miles. This is a day trip. So the idea of these major metro areas, we are the easternmost point, probably the easiest place they can get to driving. We expect to draw people. The marketing is going to hit these mid-Atlantic areas. So again, we expect to draw people. Next slide. In 2017, what they found was that rural interstate routes had traffic jams for up to 13 hours after the eclipse. Almost all the viewers arrived by motor vehicle. Right after totality, every interstate route leaving the path of totality last time had red on the Google traffic maps as if this is jammed. But even off the interstates, the non-freeways in rural areas had significant traffic. You have people like, oh, I'm stuck in traffic and my phone says take this road. Or people who are familiar in the area and they want to just try to get around. Well, there's no place to get around when that many people are trying to leave at the same time. This creates significant traffic congestion in communities anywhere near the interstate or near viewing areas, long travel times, slow speeds. So that was all observed in 2017. Move on, Alex. Our expectation is large crowds from the east and south. We're not competing with cities to the west of us, Buffalo, Erie, Cleveland, you know, Columbus. Those cities are going to get traffic from the west and some of the south. Can't go north, so the bulk of our traffic coming in is going to come in from the east and the south, and it's going to leave headed towards the east and the south. Like I said, you know, Boston, Albany, Syracuse, Binghamton, the whole mid-Atlantic coast, we can expect people from there. But it's occurring on a Monday afternoon. So the expectation is that people will kind of trickle in over the weekend. Maybe see a little bit. So the 1 to 4 days, 3 eclipses will be coming in. What the challenge becomes is when it ends. In 2017, most people wanted to leave or did leave within 2 hours after the end of the eclipse, with the majority of those in the first 15 minutes, everybody's trying to leave. Now, if you can imagine, you know, somebody, and typically the week before is a potential for an Easter break week in a lot of school districts. So if somebody in Philadelphia comes to Rochester and they decide to keep their kids out of school on Monday, well, they want to get back for Tuesday. So they're going to leave right after they have to leave. But if we can get people to stick around, and that's where we're trying to create events in the community that would help people stay around. Anybody that doesn't have to leave, we want it to stay, because everybody leaving is going to be the biggest issue. We do expect traffic jams everywhere, and you know, as Matt Orvek a couple weeks ago we were talking, he heads up the Traffic Operations Center for NISA. He's I have no idea what the roads are going to be like. I can't promise performance for anywhere. Yeah, can't promise that things won't be shut down. You won't be waiting a long time in signals. Move on. Transportation Research Board. That's the conference that Jody went to and came back. They put out a publication, Transportation Research or TR News, and they did a great article after the 2017. And these are some of the quotes they heard. And we've used this as a resource of there's lessons learned from 2017 and what to expect in 2024. We have this, a PDF version on our website. We carry printed copies to our events. I'm not going to read the quotes there, but this is something that we found very useful. You can move on. But now we have to think about some of the considerations. If we're going to have venues, where do people park? And if there's enough of a crowd, for example, Rochester Museum and Science Center is hoping to do a weekend event where they'll have thousands of people there. And potentially on the day of the eclipse, they can have 15 to 20,000 people. Does that mean some of the side streets are gonna end up being closed? And, you know, that certainly has to be coordinated. And, if you're gonna close one road, then you gotta make sure that other roads are open for people to divert to. Do we anticipate so much traffic that we wanna plan, create, say, like a lane for emergency vehicles, where, you can use cones or whatever, block off, hey, this lane is only gonna be for emergency vehicles? Do we work with the Traffic Operations Center to sort of develop some planning, or some, signal timing plans that, should they be needed, can like flip a switch and say, hey, change the signal pattern for this? Do we pre-deploy resources like tow trucks, out where they might be able to more quickly respond? And those towing contracts have to, you gotta pay the tow truck driver to sit there and wait, but the idea of trying to clear incidents quicker, especially on the major roads, you wanna be able to get that traffic flowing. But despite all this and all the visitors and all the shutdowns, routine travel still needs to be accommodated. The buses still need to run on time. People still need to get to their jobs if they can't get to work. Routine commerce is gonna happen, medical visits. There are stuff that maybe can get rescheduled, but a lot of stuff can't. Routine travel still needs to occur, and how do we make the best experience we can for our residents? Next slide, please. So when we think about the considerations, we also look at the venues. Where are they? Are they close enough to each other they might cause conflicts? For example, we know Rochester Museum and Science Center is planning something. I guess Memorial Art Gallery is thinking about something. Rohrbach Brewery and Laugh and Go Chocolates have already planned to rent out public market and create an event. You start to see, when you start layering things on a map, things might be close enough that they can have potential conflicts. We know when we do things like Bill's Camp and PGA, we have satellite parking with shuttles. If we have some venues that are anticipating something big enough, is that something to consider? People that are coming to the area from elsewhere, those long-distance travelers, they're going to need current information and potentially changes, rapidly changing information. So, making sure whether we're using social media, highway advisory radio, the message boards, all of the above, we want to make sure we're getting information out to our long-distance travelers as well. And then again, all these different facilities are owned by different jurisdictions, so coordination is going to be key. We want to make sure everybody is working together. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we've been working on internally is trying to build up a Google map. And the reason we're using Google Map is that the general public is kind of familiar with it. They can pick this up. Even somebody coming from outside the area will be able to open up this map. We're trying to plot out I'm calling them sanctioned venues or sponsored events. These are things that we know are happening, that some organization is doing it, the municipal agencies are aware of it, as opposed to spontaneous pop-up events that we can't know about. We can plan for sanctioned sponsored events and try to plot them on the map. You see the telescopes there. We're anticipating potential for something at Frontier Field, certainly something at Rochester Museum and Science Center, certainly something at Rochester Public Market. But we also try to plot out where's the airport, where's the RTS bus terminal, where's the train station, where's Greyhound Trailways, where are the hospitals. So we're trying to layer information. Parking, where's parking available? Is it privately owned, publicly owned? What kind of capacity? So we're trying to build this information and drop it on a map that anybody can use. And I believe we'll have to test out the feature, but I think if even having this map the way it's located, if somebody says, I am here and I'm trying to get here, get directions on the Google map even if they're not familiar with it. So that is a work in progress, and we're coordinating with RMSC that it'll be able to layer into their website as well. Want to just point out, Strong Memorial Hospital is the region's only level 1 trauma center and burn center. It is critical that that access be maintained. So back to the idea of, do we create emergency lanes? Do we want to designate roads near hospitals, you know, particularly with Strong? You know, do we have Mount Hope Avenue with a coned off lane that only the ambulance could use? We don't know the answers to that, but those are things that we want to start thinking about. How do we ensure, and then out in the other counties, you know, you look at something like the hospital in Batavia is the only hospital in Genesee County, and I think Orleans County doesn't have a hospital. And different community hospitals, you know, there's different level of services. So we want to create information there and plan for emergency access. Next slide, please. The URMSC, if you don't know already, they have a mobile stroke unit. This is essentially an ICU on wheels, but it's still critical that somebody experiencing a stroke gets to the hospital as quick as they can. As they say, you know, with a stroke, time equals brain. The brain damage only increases with time. So the idea of, again, what do we do if this has to be deployed? We don't want it stuck in traffic. That's just one example of the kinds of things we want to think about from a traffic standpoint. Next slide, please. We have tools available to us, though. You see in the upper left, that is a picture for within the Traffic Operations Center. And right in the middle there are the cameras. The camera feeds are going into the Traffic Operations Center. We have message boards, portable message boards that could be deployed on a trailer versus the overhead ones that are fixed. I talked about, you know, do we want pre-deploy tow trucks? The Highway Emergency Local Patrol is something that we have out there. They assist motorists with breakdowns and simple, you know, did they get a flat tire? They could run out of gas. They have push bumpers. They can try to push cars off the side of the road if needed. There is the potential, certainly no commitment, but we might be able to bring some help crews from other parts of the state to try to boost our capacity in Western New York. But these patrols are on the expressways, try to keep traffic moving. Obviously, you know, our emergency folks, police, fire, ambulance need to be there. The signals, we can work at signal patterns. So we have tools available to us. We want to be able to coordinate. So on the emergency management side of things, we have been talking to, again, the New York State dishes, our county emergency management. We started talking to some of them. We've learned that there is a local emergency, I get the name wrong, in Wayne County. Lori presented a couple weeks ago, LEPC? I'm sorry? LEPC. So Local Emergency Planning Committee, and we're trying to get those folks involved. And we're trying to encourage everybody that talks to us, like, hey, get connected with your emergency management folks at the county level, at the state level, at the local level. This is a planned event. We know it's coming, but it's going to be at many venues. And every venue is going to have its own needs. We're trying to make, as I said, we're coordinated with Department of Transportation, and they're talking to the emergency management folks, county sheriffs, state and local police departments. We're trying to get informed, fire coordinators, ambulances, and we expect the incident command system, which is an established way of managing events, will be up and running. The governor's office is working toward a statewide task force. I don't know what the official term is. I don't know that it's up and running yet, but it was the idea of multiple departments. I think they started hearing from transportation folks, tourism folks, parks folks, emergency management, like realizing, like, okay, we have to have a coordinated effort at the state level. So again, the governor's office is working on standing up a multi-agency committee. I suspect many counties will have at least some portion of the emergency management operations active that day. So we'll see. Next slide, please, Alex. So, you know, the question becomes, planned event at multiple locations, in multiple counties. We're gonna have one event that might be at 200 venues, you know, it's not gonna be one central place. We've heard the Village of Hilton is thinking of having an event at the high school. That's great, they're gonna have certain needs, and their community could probably be factored in there. When you look at opportunities for visitors, if the states can open up the tent sites and RV sites at Letchworth, at Lakeside State Park, you can think about any kind of viewing experience you want. Do you want to be by yourself? Do you want to be with other people? Do you want to be at the Science Museum? Do you want to be on a campground? Many different experiences we can have. We're even trying to make sure folks like the Coast Guard and the various Marine patrols are aware, because, you know, hey, it could be a nice sunny day and people will go out on their boat, forgetting how cold that water is. You know, and if they go into the water, or intentionally or not, that becomes an emergency. You know, it's life at risk. So again, keeping people on aware of what's going on, and the more advance notice we know about planned events or planned sanctioned venues, the more we can try to integrate it and make sure the right people are talking to each other. Next slide, we're getting close to wrapping it up. Some various resources related to science, to traffic, to various training materials. GTC has resources, RMSC and the Strassenberg Planetarium have resources. There are local task forces I talked about, and then the National AAS task force. AAS has a website dedicated to it. Great American Eclipse has a lot of information, and they try to sell a lot of stuff, but they have good information. And then there's a lot of lessons learned from 2017. Next slide, please. So, wanted to see around the table anything that you guys are hearing already, or what your agencies are already planning to do, so we can document it and be a resource. Just open it up, you know, I guess, what kind of, is this new information for folks? Hopefully it's not.
No, Genesee County, we've already had 3 different training and planning meetings.
Great.
Yep. Locally and regionally.
What happened to the presentation? Oh, you're switching so you can type, okay.
You have, it sounds like, oh, I'm sorry, Shelley, are you?
No.
Oh. I'm just saying it's gonna be quite a scope of work, or a work plan for GTC. Do you have a staff member you're gonna have sort of in charge, or how do we handle, how do we do this and accomplish this? And we have our existing, of course, workload or schedule of projects in addition. It's all good, but I'm just saying, what's our plan for our component of this and making it all work well?
Great question, and as planners, we knew it was coming. So in the current work program, a certain amount of time for primarily Lori Marr and her staff, who is all about community outreach and working with other governments, has been heavily involved, and we have staff, a significant portion of her staff time in the current year, and even more in the next year. Same thing for me, a good chunk of time, and then next year, even more of my time devoted to this. We can pull in other staff as needed, as sort of like part of our local study support, but primarily it's Lori Marr and myself that are doing the outreach and coordinating with other communities.
And if we get some new opportunities from federal funding, or different opportunities come along, we can add staff to help make sure that we don't miss out on opportunities. I mean, this is great, it's a great thing, but also we have, you know, opportunities that could come along that we're unaware of now that could help bring infrastructure dollars and help our overall picture for many years to come.
Yeah, I don't expect any kind of funding for infrastructure improvements, but the
well, just saying.
Yeah, no, I know, and certainly want to keep an eye out for opportunities. The big thing, as I said earlier, with GTC not owning any facilities, our big role is coordination and trying to make sure that those that have a responsibility for these different things are aware of what's coming, so that, you know, we have, for example, in one of our meetings that came up, the idea of, you have routine maintenance on some utilities. Well, you can not schedule routine maintenance around, hey, I wanna flush, water lines, or I gotta do, remodel a sewer line or whatever. But if that water main breaks, that's an emergency, doesn't matter. So, but anything that can be scheduled, anything that's sort of routine, we wanna make sure the people that are responsible for that are aware of what's going on, so they can adjust their schedules. But it's primarily, raising awareness and supporting coordination from the GCC staff side. Angela?
I was just gonna say, there's also an additional cost as well, because as we talk about coordination and some of the activities that we're gonna have to do, we're talking about additional resources and staff time. And as we go through that process, I think it's something that we're all gonna have to start talking about, having additional staffing out there. You've got overtime, you've got all of those additional things.
And that's why we're trying to raise awareness, because, whether you're prepared for or not, this is happening.
Yeah.
And by us raising awareness, the visitors are coming,
Right.
it's gonna get dark, the animals are gonna act a little weird. People are going to be drawn to this, so, like I said, whether you're prepared for them or not, they're coming. And your tourism folks are trying to draw them, so hopefully conversations are being had, enough in advance so that from a budget perspective, a manpower perspective, logistics, again, that you're not caught unaware. Great.
Alex, can you go back to that traffic consideration slide?
Sure.
Please. I just wanted to make one thought on that. And also, just so you know, we are having discussions within the city of Rochester about this. We have people that were involved with RMFC as board members and things like that. So we've talked about it and started looking at, what are some of the elements we can do. That one. I look at the lane on the left, and I saw the contraflow on the expressways, just for like because you're saying everybody's leaving after 15 minutes, and right here, what I see is really that's at half capacity versus the ability to say, hey, we can do this for up to 6 hours, and if you're using 490 east, well, guess what? If you want to get around locally, use Monroe Ave, use 31, use something else as opposed to basically having a roadway that you're going to need, right? You guys are
Interesting choices.
I have no idea if those conversations are being discussed at the state level. Obviously, something like that. You think about like down south where they have the hurricane routes, the evacuation routes. You
already have the diversion routes identified.
Yeah, but I mean, the whole idea of contraflow and crossing over, those exist elsewhere because they routinely have things. I don't know what's involved in trying to establish that and say get federal highway approval. But that's certainly, you raise that. It's honestly not something I had thought about. I don't know what kind of conversations that DOT might take, but, I would ask Joel to bring that back since the expressways are under your jurisdiction. The thruway
I'll jump in. I was in the 2017, I was out west. It was a great experience. The term traffic nightmare is an understatement. And, so I also came back talking about this to a degree. DOT is discussing, contraflow's been discussed. Talking to the Thruway Authority, right now I'd say everything's on the table. Jim, so we have time. Jim mentioned several things that we can be talking about right now, things like writing up a contract that you can't start construction. Those decisions are happening now. The big one I want to bring to the group is your school districts are planning their academic calendars. They've heard from us that that is not a day to have school buses on the road, at least afternoon. I would really appreciate it if everyone in this group brought that back to their community, that they heard from us. Please reiterate that, school. This far.
With the school, the task force has had, conversations with superintendents and, presented to the Monroe County superintendents. They've met with Wade Norwood, who's on the Board of Regents representing our region. This is being discussed at the state, education department. One of the challenges, when we talk about just add another day, well, people have to arrange for childcare. We also want to be cognizant of, there are some families that school is the primary source of nutrition with breakfast and lunch for a lot of families, throughout the region. So one more day, well, that you can probably accommodate with, if they were taking home lunches for the week before, if it was going to be closed. We had at the session, actually Matt Orvek from NISDOT, his wife is a teacher, and I guess it's still up in the air whether between Easter and the April break. But I know the school calendars have typically gone out pretty far, so that's a decision that's out of our hands, but as Joe said, if we can enforce it or reinforce the message that absolutely we don't want school buses. If we do a half day, I mean, if we could have events after school that, maybe kids learning experience with an after-school activity. The last thing we want, there's a phrase that it was coined by one of the AAS task force members from New Hampshire. No child left inside. The idea of trying to get children to experience it. We think about situations where in some neighborhoods and some communities, parents are working, the child comes home from school by themselves, they're told to lock the door and wait for parent comes home. They're inside, they can't go outside, but if there's something at the school and some type of coordinated event, maybe they get to experience everything. So, there's a lot of conversations that have to happen outside of our realm, but again, to raise the awareness. Especially, we don't want school dismissal. Folks are gonna hit it free, and there is traffic at every, we don't want school buses. It's all possible. Any other questions, comments? Or I should say anything else that you're hearing in your agency. And you're gonna continue to hear from us. I don't know how often we'll bring it up to the board, but we're definitely communicating with all our communities. I think there was a slide about some resources towards the end. Our own. So this is what our publicinput.com page looks like for the Eclipse. We're going to this is here. That'll be our hub for GTC. Moving on. RMSC is hosting a website, Eclipse 2024. They have a countdown. They're going to continue. I have a lot of information there, trying to coordinate things. Moving on. There is also an Eclipse Web dashboard, and this is something that could be of interest of folks around here. This is meant for interagencies. It's a member-only situation. It's not meant for the general public, but it's a forum whereby folks can get connected with other folks in their sector. There's a transportation sector. Anybody that wants to be part of this, let me know. We can make sure you're emailing there. Trying to make sure there's resources on there. One of the features is they're called Somebody Oughta. You think about something, and like, somebody ought to look at this. I don't know who's responsible. You throw it in there and try to find who would be responsible for it. The school buses are not in our wheelhouse, but somebody ought to be talking about the school buses. So this EclipseWeb.org, and actually the way it was structured, Deb Ross runs Kids Out and About and has her across the country. So it's set up that multiple cities can use this platform. Rochester's charter members, I guess you would say. So any of your agencies, if you want to have somebody on here, this community, more of a stakeholders dashboard, again, behind the scenes, your agency, you don't have to worry about the general public seeing, hey, I'm worried about how do I do this, who's done it. It's not going out for the general public.
So that's an opportunity for sharing. That's it. So, again, want to raise awareness, give you a resource, we'll connect you any way we can, we'll try to give you whatever information we can. We'll continue to reach out, and collaboration with to it, conversations in the city hall, there's conversations at Monroe County, at all the counties, certainly our GRTA, we're talking to Julie, have considerations, what do we do for operations that weekend or that day. It's not gonna be a typical day for anybody.
Any further business to come before the board this morning? Motion to adjourn. Second. Those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carried. Happy holidays, everyone.
Thank you.
That was exciting.
That's one word for it.
Because I know I won't be around in 21.